Hi everyone, I'm your host Alexander Kingsford, and welcome back to Amy's Rundown. Today, we'll be looking at two internationally recognized films, how the directors behind them respond to their social-political context, and the role power has in society and politics. In this conversation, we'll be joined by Yoki, a Sydney-based designer and illustrator. Hey Yoki.
Hi.
And Misty, another Sydney-based designer and illustrator wanted by the police. How's it going, Misty?
Hey.
Let's start by introducing Shin Godzilla. A take on the classic Godzilla franchise, this movie was filmed in 2016 and directed by Hideaki Anno and Shigi Haituchi. Our second film is Parasite, released in 2019, directed by Bong Joon-ho, won the Academy Award in 2019. These films are set in Japan and Korea, respectively. Yoki, how has this been dissected in Shin Godzilla, and did this resonate with the people of Japan?
So to give some context, the original Godzilla film, released in 1954, has an anti-nuclear stand after the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombing in World War II. This stand is reinforced in Shin Godzilla as a response to the Fukushima nuclear disaster in 2011, particularly in showcasing the government response to the events. This can be seen in specific sequences in the film that uses very similar visual comparison to the photographs that were taken in the pre-11 triple events.
It's really interesting how specific the director's response is to the Fukushima event. In Parasite, their response seems to be a little less obvious, but Bong Joon-ho is in fact providing commentary on the political state of Korea. Misty, what's your take on this? Was there any way this was captured in Parasite?
Yes, absolutely. Bong Joon-ho was actually blacklisted by the ex-South Korean president Park Geun-hye due to being too liberal, to be honest. Her and almost half of South Korea's living presidents have been or are still in jail due to corruption-related charges, so you can see it's a pretty big issue. Parasite is actually a critique on how corruption ultimately leads to the demise of society, perhaps reflecting on how systemic these issues are within the Korean social-political context.
Oh my god, fascinating! Well, how does Ho actually symbolize this in Parasite?
Yeah, so objects play an important part in how this is communicated. There was an intentional use of a collectible rock gifted to the Kim family, also known as susok. The rock is meant to bring material wealth to the family, however, it becomes associated with the demise of the Kims, actually. It highlights how their greed drove them to cross the line, as Nathan Park famously said, and should be held accountable for their actions. I don't know, but perhaps like the ex-presidents did when they were imprisoned for corruption, this could actually be a reflection of that. But it also could mean that the idea of luck is just an illusion in the state of the world we live in, where the already wealthy will only ever have access to wealth.
I like how subtle Parasite uses symbolism. However, there's no subtlety in Shin Godzilla. The symbolism of disaster and destruction is prominently shown through the antagonist, the Godzilla. This is particularly shown in the scene where it appears in Tokyo, shooting out nuclear beams. The dark shadow of Godzilla and the sky contrasting against the explosive orange and the chemical nuclear reactive purple. It signifies a destructive power. By transitioning from the extreme close-up shot to the wide-angle shots, then back to the Godzilla itself, it signifies the enormity of power that Godzilla has, as well as its destruction power.
Although entirely different films, what I find quite insightful is how both The Rock and Godzilla are extremely prominent in scenes of destruction. Ultimately, both films can be viewed as tragedies, using comedy and satire to remind us that they're both critiques of their respective cultural contexts. What I find interesting is the presence and response to American culture. Misty, how does this play in Parasite?
I'm glad you've asked that. As a film critiquing its social-political context, it inadvertently highlights how the influence of America plays a role in social stratification in Korea, particularly through pop design, I find. So I'm not sure if you noticed, but the frame poster of an article on Nathan Park's success in New York City showcases how his endeavors in America are viewed as a major achievement to the Korean family. Park's son's teepee as well later in the movie is specifically referenced to be being made in America, therefore being of high quality. And in addition to that, the fabricated US college graduation certificate makes the Parks family view Jessica to be a highly qualified individual, although we all know that, it's fake. So all these elements place America on a pedestal, ultimately Ho suggests this pro-American stance that it's actually fundamentally based on superficial values. So really, it's a critique.
So Yoki, what's your take?
I think Shin Godzilla also largely holds an anti-Americanization position. This is particularly expressed through their dissatisfaction with the continuous American intervention of using nuclear weapons as a resolution to the Godzilla disaster. However, at the same time, Japan also reflects on their own somewhat conservative values through the juxtaposition of the characters. For example, the arrival of Kayoko and Patterson, a young American ambassador, places an emphasis on the differences between Japan and America. It is specifically stated that in the US, the skills and ability of an individual is valued, whereas in Japan, an individual's age or years devoted to a position is more important. This is further emphasized in how Kayoko is portrayed through styling, where she's dressed in a dynamic range of formal to casual outfits, contrasting against the homogeneous corporate attire of Japanese politicians.
Yeah, thanks, Yoki. Look, it's clearly evident that both Korea and Japan have complex relationships with America. Now that we've deconstructed the lens in which both Shin Godzilla and Parasite were created, what I want to know is, what were the directors trying to say? I feel these films provide critical and social commentary, whether it be in the realms of politics or in the walls of one's home. What are these films really about?
To put it simply, social stratification and the imbalance of power that permeates Korean society are the core messages one should take away from watching Parasite. As a point of reference, Bong Joon-ho stated that essentially we all live in the same country called capitalism. In response to the international success of the film, the differences in social status of the Park family and King family are continuously reinforced to showcase class differences. Although the lives of both families are destroyed, these class disparities still remain at the end of the day.
So essentially, the wealthy stay wealthy. How is this shown throughout Parasite? I noticed personally that there were plenty of staircases in these films, and I felt that it was a metaphor for the contrasting status that is shown between the two families.
For sure, the several constructed staircases act as a symbol of their socioeconomic differences. The Park family and their home are understood to be at the top of the staircase, the upper echelons of society really, whereas the Kim family and their residents are understood to be at the bottom, the gutters of society. This is visualized again through the comparison of the glass windows in both family homes. So you see the Kim's view, and that is actually of the street above, where they aren't shielded from the judging eyes of the world. They're literally looked down upon. On the other hand, the wall of manicured trees that surround the Park family home protects them from the gaze of the ordeals of the everyday man. They are separate from society. They are exclusive. Once again, even the use of space between the two homes, where one is confined and cluttered with secondhand objects, and the other that is almost sterile, filled with minimalist furniture and art, further reinforces this wealth disparity. Ultimately, the combination of props and set design in Parasite really play an important role in showcasing the imbalance of power, wealth, and ultimately status between these two families.
I feel this idea of power imbalance also is prominent in Shin Godzilla. Although a monster film, the majority of the film showcases how the Japanese government conduct their democratic duties. We know that the director used genre to comment on how Japan directs politics. How is power imbalance shown? Yoki?
Power imbalance is shown through the reaction between the government officials and the ordinary public when they face a natural disaster at the same time. This is particularly shown through the static and repetitive camera shots of politicians sitting in a comfortable conference room in the building, and then directly cut into the shaky camera movement, capturing the mass panic of the general public. This is further reinforced through the prop design. Between the instant noodles eaten by the government officers and the fresh ramen cooked specifically for the Prime Minister, while he was complaining how soggy the noodle was, we established the luxury that comes with the hierarchical power. Interestingly, costumes are also used to showcase a sense of uniformity amongst the government officials, showcasing the world that they act like a collective power. This, however, juxtaposed with the dialogue. For example, in the conference room where they asked for firing permission sequentially, even though they were all literally sitting next to each other. This suggests that there's a hierarchical structure within the cabinets.
Okay, so yeah, to wrap this up, we've been able to establish that these two seemingly different films actually do have quite a lot in common. They ultimately critique the socio-political environments and particularly speak to the people of Korea and Japan respectively. Misty and Yoki, thank you so much for sharing your valuable insight on Parasite and Shin Godzilla.
No worries, thank you for having us.
Thank you.